The forest of Cauldron 7 did not sound like Earth. Ethan Cole noticed that within the first hour. On Earth, forests hummed, wind through leaves, insects chirring, birds calling to one another. Cauldron's forests listened. The towering silver-barked trees creaked softly, their branches flexing like slow-moving limbs. Bioluminescent moss clung to roots and stones, glowing faintly blue as the planet's dim sun filtered through the canopy. Even the air felt attentive, heavy with spores and unseen life. Ethan adjusted the strap of his pack and forced himself to keep moving.
He was supposed to be dead.
The crash had come without warning, an electrical storm unlike anything human sensors had cataloged. One moment his survey shuttle was descending through cloud cover, the next it was spiraling, alarms screaming as alien lightning tore through his systems. He remembered hitting the emergency eject, remembered the roar of wind, then darkness. Now he walked alone through an alien forest, days away from the nearest human outpost, his emergency beacon smashed beyond repair. Alone. At least, that was what he believed. Ethan stopped near a stream, kneeling to refill his canteen with filtered water. As he worked, a strange sensation crawled up his spine, the unmistakable feeling of being watched. He froze, scanning the underbrush, pulse hammering. Nothing. No movement. No sound. Just the slow breathing of the forest. Get a grip, he muttered to himself. You're jumpy. Still, he rested his hand on the compact plasma cutter at his hip as he moved on. High above him, partially cloaked by the shifting patterns of the trees, she observed. Veolyra of the Threeni had been tracking him since dawn. She moved without sound, her long limbs flowing over branches and bark as if gravity were a suggestion rather than a rule. Her skin, smooth, opalescent violet, shifted subtly to match the light, a natural camouflage evolved over millennia. Golden eyes, slit-pupilled and unblinking, followed the human below with intense focus. He was smaller than she had expected, fragile-looking even, and yet he endured. Veolyra had watched many off-worlders die in Cauldron's forests. Predators, toxins, the forest itself. It culled the careless without mercy. Humans, until now, had been nothing but distant rumors. Loud machines in the sky. Metal structures far from Threeni lands. This one walked alone. Injured. Tired. And still he pressed forward. Her people believed humans were dangerous. Expansionists. Destroyers of ecosystems. That was the Council's decree. Observe, avoid. Eliminate if necessary. Veolyra had volunteered for observation. Now, she wasn't sure what she was observing anymore. That night, Ethan built a small fire using synthetic fuel tabs. The glow pushed back the darkness, but did nothing to quiet his nerves. He ate a ration bar slowly, savoring each bland bite like it might be his last real meal. That feeling returned, stronger now. He stared into the trees. I know you're out there, he said, his voice echoing strangely. If you're gonna kill me, just do it already. The forest remained silent. No attack came. Instead, a soft sound, almost musical, drifted through the air. Ethan turned sharply, heart racing. A figure stepped into the firelight. She was tall, taller than any human woman, slender but powerful, her limbs graceful and alien. Her eyes reflected the flames like molten gold. She wore no armor, only woven living fibers that clung to her form like leaves. Ethan's breath caught. Okay, he said hoarsely. That's new. Veolyra tilted her head, studying him openly now. Her voice, when she spoke, was melodic yet precise, her translator implant rendering her words into accented English. You are injured, yet you build fire instead of shelter. Why? Ethan stared. You speak English. I learned, she replied simply. By listening. He let out a shaky laugh. Of course you did. Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken possibilities. Ethan slowly raised his hands, palms open. I'm not a soldier. I'm a surveyor. I didn't mean to trespass. Lyra watched his body language carefully. Fear, yes, but no aggression. No attempt to flee or strike. You bleed, she said, pointing to the torn fabric on his leg.
Yeah.
Crash landing will do that. She stepped closer. Every instinct screamed at Ethan to run, but he held his ground. Lyra knelt, her long fingers hovering near his wound. May I? He swallowed. If you're not gonna poison me, sure. She almost smiled. The days that followed changed everything. Lyra guided Ethan through safer paths, showing him which plants purified water and which would kill him in minutes. In return, Ethan shared stories of Earth, of oceans and deserts, of cities that touched the sky, of humanity's endless curiosity. She listened, fascinated. Humans were not what the Council had described. They were loud, emotional, reckless, but also resilient, tender, capable of awe. One night, as they rested beneath a canopy of glowing leaves, Ethan asked the question that had been haunting him. You could have killed me on day one, he said quietly. Why didn't you? Lyra considered the answer carefully. Because you thanked the forest. He frowned. What? When you drank from the stream, she said. You spoke words of gratitude. No off-worlder does that. Ethan shrugged. My grandmother taught me. Said you should respect the places that keep you alive. Something in Lyra's chest tightened. Respect. That was a word her people lived by. From that moment, her mission changed. She was no longer observing a potential threat. She was protecting him. When the predators came, it was sudden and violent. Six-legged shadow beasts burst from the undergrowth, their maws lined with crystalline teeth. Ethan barely had time to draw his cutter before Lyra leapt forward, a blur of motion and deadly precision. She fought like the forest itself, fluid, ruthless, beautiful. Ethan joined her without hesitation, placing himself between her and a wounded beast, firing until his weapon overheated. One of the creatures lunged toward Lyra's blind spot. Ethan tackled it. The pain was blinding, but he held on, screaming as claws raked his armor. Lyra's cry echoed through the trees as she struck the killing blow. When it was over, Ethan lay bleeding, gasping for breath. Lyra knelt beside him, hands trembling. Why? She demanded. You would have died. He smiled weakly. Couldn't let you take the hit. Something ancient and powerful stirred within her. Thrini warriors protected their own. This human had protected her. They reached the edge of human territory 3 days later. The distant hum of machinery filled the air, clashing with the forest's rhythm. Ethan stopped, suddenly reluctant. That's my world, he said softly. Lyra knew what awaited her if she crossed that line. Capture, dissection, endless questions. And yet, the thought of leaving him felt like tearing out a piece of herself. My people will ask why I spared you, she said. What will you tell them? Ethan asked. She met his eyes. The truth. That you are not alone in the universe. And that you are worth watching. He laughed, a little sadly. Guess I owe you my life. No, she replied. You shared it. A rescue team found Ethan hours later. He spoke carefully in his debrief, choosing his words with intention. He described the forest as inhabited, intelligent, worthy of protection. He never mentioned Lyra by name. From the shadows of the trees, she watched the humans leave, her heart heavy but hopeful. Because somewhere between the crash and the firelight, between fear and trust, 2 worlds had touched. and neither would ever be the same. Far above Cauldron 7, Human Command began revising their expansion plans. And deep within the listening forest, Vealira smiled. He had thought he was alone. He never truly was. Months later, the forest of Cauldron 7 remained unchanged to the untrained eye. The silver-barked trees still whispered to one another. The moss still glowed beneath the roots. Predators still hunted, storms still rolled across the canopy, and the listening silence still waited for those careless enough to ignore it. But something had changed. Ethan Cole stood at the edge of the forest once more, this time in a reinforced expedition suit, a diplomatic insignia stitched to his shoulder instead of a survival patch. Behind him, human scientists, xenobiologists, and negotiators waited at a respectful distance. No drills. No weapons powered on. No terraforming equipment. Only observation tools and open hands. He took a breath and stepped forward alone. "I'm here," he said softly, his voice carrying into the trees. "Just like I promised." The forest answered, not with words, but with movement. Leaves shifted. Light bent. And Vealira emerged. She no longer hid herself from him. Her skin shimmered openly in the daylight, violet and gold catching the sun. Around her neck hung a ceremonial band of woven living fiber, the mark of one who spoke for her people. "You returned," she said. "I told you I would." They stood facing each other again, not survivor and watcher this time, but equals. Ethan gestured behind him. "They're ready to listen." No expansion. No claims. Just dialogue. Vealira studied the humans in the distance, her expression cautious but hopeful. "My people will listen as well, because one human listened first." She stepped closer, lowering her head in a gesture of respect rarely shown to outsiders. Ethan mirrored it instinctively, earning a soft, surprised sound from her, something very close to laughter. From that day on, Cauldron 7 became something unheard of in human history. A shared world. No borders carved by force. No forests burned for progress. Instead, paths were negotiated, research conducted side by side, and knowledge exchanged carefully, respectfully. Humans learned how the forest lived. The Thrini learned how humans dreamed, and at the heart of it all stood a man who had once believed himself utterly alone, and an alien woman who had watched him long before he ever knew it. At night, when the forest glowed and the air hummed with quiet life, Ethan would sit beside Vealira beneath the canopy. Sometimes they spoke of politics, sometimes of stars. Sometimes they said nothing at all. Silence, he had learned, could also be a form of trust. The universe had always been watching humanity. It had simply been waiting for one human to look back, with humility instead of conquest. And because of that, humanity was no longer alone. Not in the forest. Not among the stars.